Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I am sharing a new tool in my creative space, the Slimline punch board by WRMK. Now this is new to me, I believe it's absolutely new to their line as well, and it did come blister packed with some instructions and a little tease of what you can do with the punch board. It does come with a series of measurements. These are in inches only, which to a metric girl like myself is not ideal, but it essentially is built to make 2 slimline envelopes and 2 cards that match those envelopes. I have played around making different sized envelopes and cards, and I have converted measurements into metric, which I will share today. But in general terms, it's a new tool, and I'm happy about any new tool that comes into my creative space. There are a series of instructions at the top of the board, envelope score lines and card score line. They're really the only score lines, unlike the regular We Are Memory Keepers envelope punch board. It doesn't have a series of measurements for you to alter the size of the envelope. It generally is made for the 2 sizes of cards and envelopes, and you can adjust as you need to from there or choose an alternate product that they have in their range. So I thought I'd demonstrate the standard card and envelope. So out of a sheet of 12 by 12, you're cutting a 9 by 11.5 piece of cardstock, or 23 by 29 centimeters roundabout, and you cut and score that according to the instructions on the board itself. So it does have a lever or an arm that spins up. You just close the arm and you take this piece that has a guiding nodule and then the cutting blade, and you put the nodule in the track on the board and you simply follow the track. It does take a little bit of getting used to. You pop it back in here, and underneath the E-arm is solid, so you won't be cutting yourself there. And the board does come with a scoring tool, and you can remove that piece of paper to make it easier, and you find the score line and you follow that score line. And then you just repeat that on all 4 sides. I'm using double-sided paper today. Same deal. Cut. And score. You'll find that score's already there on that top line. And then repeating at the other edges. Probably should get into the habit of putting the tool back in the safety spot there, and you probably should make sure you don't rip through the paper like I just did, but we'll cope. And then down that score line. You'll find they're already there mostly. And then it's a case of just using those score lines to fold your envelope. Now the beauty of this is it does provide for you to have a top opening envelope or to piece it together for a side envelope. So that's the larger size of the Slimline. I'll walk through in a moment a couple of examples, but before I do that, I will also show you a gusseted version of that particular envelope. So I have used the mini Slimline size here, and I have gusseted it so that those of us who have very layered cards may then be able to put those cards in the envelope without putting stress on the envelope. So it is the same process for the first lot of measurements. So I cut, and I take that out and I score. And then before I move on to the next cut and score line, I'm going to lift that, and I've measured 1/4 of an inch here and here. And then I score again. And repeating this process will give you an opportunity to build a gusset when you get to that stage of putting the envelope together. So it is score like you have been. Cut on the first score line, shift up and out, and score again. And then repeating that process. It's good with that tool if you do keep it tight in the actual hold line. And then going up to those lines and scoring again. And you'll find once you've done that, you've got all of the score lines that you need into the track and the final cut off there. And then you have double score lines that you can utilise. Obviously working pretty quickly right now. You might take a little bit more time when you're cutting that for yourself. And then you can see in this, where the tracks are, you can do a little bit of trimming. And if you do that on all 4 sides, I'll get a little closer in just a moment. So cutting and then trimming. And you'll get to a point on these envelopes. In fact, on the top, I normally just take that off altogether, just so that it's totally clean on the top. So you end up with these little flaps here, and then you're folding your card up and sealing it, your envelope, and you're creating that gusset line there so your thicker cards can stay in there. There we go. That's how I've put the particular punch board to use since I've had it. And the really nice thing is when you cut out your original piece of 12 by 12, there is a strip on the side, and that strip fits very nicely on the front of the card, which I'll show you in a couple of examples that I have here. So this here is the mini Slimline, and you can pause to get the measurements if you'd like to see the difference between inches and centimetres. And then this is the card size that you make going into the envelope, and you just use the measurements of the card and then the card scoring line, or simply fold the card in half. And I've brought this together, and it does have multiple layers, but it still fits nicely within this envelope. It's obviously pretty chunky. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 layers on this card, including twine and ribbon and all of the good things. Takes a little moment to hustle it in, but you can still get that into there. But if you want more room, you can go back to this gusseted design, and it will fit inside with a lot more space around the card. And then moving on to the standard Slimline. So here are the measurements for the standard Slimline. The inch measurements are always on the board. And then once again, I've brought together this card. It too has multiple layers on the card. And there is a gusseted version of the taller card, or envelope for the taller card, and once again it fits in there with a lot more room around the card, so it is a lot easier to get it in and out of that envelope. It's just about whether or not your mail handler will ship that safely, or whether or not you'd have to put it in a padded envelope. And then in addition to that, I have measurements for a standard C6 envelope. So this is very similar to the Slimline mini envelope in size, but in Australia we use a C6 envelope all the time, and of course metric measurements. So for those who would like those types of envelopes for their everyday cards, that works really nicely on the board. And I've also managed to use acetate on the board, so this cutter will cut through the acetate, and then you can either have a clear envelope or put something inside that envelope. That works very nicely as well. I was a bit surprised that this cutting board didn't have multiple measurements on the board, but I'm happy with its process. And importantly, when you're cutting on this board, unlike the boards that initially score on an angle, you do find that you can manage the direction of your pattern much easier, particularly for those patterns that might have stripes that need to match up. So I'm liking it so far. I will try out all sorts of different sizes and see whether or not this board will work generally for those sizes, or whether or not I will return to my alternate board. But for now, it's a very creative day in my creative space, and I hope it is in yours as well. Enjoy if you have received this punch board. I'd love to see what you're making with it.